Hi and welcome to the shop. Today in this video is going to be some stories that I downloaded from my Instagram and I shared with some of my friends and family on Instagram and Facebook, and after the project was done I realized it all goes away. So some people might want to see it. I figured I would share it with YouTube and let you guys check out the oil cooler seals that I dealt with. So thanks for checking it out. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And also the Instagram stories is why the picture is tilted the wrong way. So thanks for stopping out. To the shop tonight. Oh, I've been out here for a couple hours already. But tonight we're starting to work on my wife's car. It leaks oil everywhere it goes, and the shop didn't want to work on it. So here I am. Let's check it out. So this is an OM642. There is an oil cooler that sits underneath that turbo way down in there that has two seals in it that leak, and they're leaking and coming out the back, and that's what we're going to go after and change. It requires the turbo to come out, the intake manifolds to come out, fuel filter, fuel rail, and a bunch of other stuff in there, EGR, all that jazz. All has to come out. So we have some of it out already. There's the strut brace, the intake plenum, and a bunch of other stuff over there. This is the one thing I wanted to look at, though, that's pretty interesting. I've been getting oil in the turbo, and so I added a catch can, and the catch can had some oil in it. So we have quite a bit of oil, actual oil, getting out through our crankcase vent and into the catch can, which previously was the turbo, getting straight into the turbo, but now it's getting into that catch can, which makes me wonder if I have a lot of blow-by and maybe this is not worth my time. This car has been a royal pain since the start. Even though it's a great car to drive, the maintenance is absurd. So, even though I would much rather be doing my tubing bender or pack the thing TIG, we're going to get my wife's car back on the road and stop dumping big puddles of oil all over the place. And hopefully maybe get a year or two out of it before I give up on it again. But anyway, I'll show you more as I go along. We'll see how far we get tonight. Thanks for stopping out. We'll talk to you again soon. Turbo's missing. You know what they say. Every job is just one broken bolt from going really, really wrong. Really, really wrong. I am not admitting defeat, but day one was not a success. So, I showed you earlier we broke off a couple of bolts. I tried to get those out, and I didn't have any success. Just broke them off more. And actually, after I looked at one of them broke off more, and then I started working on them, and I realized these are not steel bolts. I can't weld steel washers to them and have them. I'll show you. They don't work, and then they do. So they are some kind of a stainless, and I can't weld a nut on them and turn them out. And one of them broke off so flush I can't even get anything to weld onto it. Even if I could weld to it flush, I can't even, it's actually below the surface there. And the other two are right there. So I'm a little bit stuck. I tried drilling the one out. I made a jig and I started center drilling it, and it's so hard. I can't get the drill to do more than a tiny little divot in there. Plus, those are flexible joints on the back of the exhaust manifolds that every time you put pressure to try to drill into it, it just slides away. It just kind of moves away from your drill, so it's almost impossible to get a good solid drill on it. So I think the exhaust manifolds need to come off. And that's not even the worst of it. The worst of it all. I mean, sometimes you work on jobs like this, you get that, it just happens and it sucks, and it's gonna be a giant mess. We're gonna be without this car for weeks, probably, maybe even months. It might never drive again, we don't know. But the part that sucks is I came in here to fix an oil leak. And with that turbo out, I can see where it's supposed to be leaking from. It's not leaking from there. It's not leaking from the oil cooler down there in the bottom. You can't see on the camera, but I can see. I can see, and I can tell you it's not leaking where I thought it was leaking. That's the worst of it. Job might have been for nothing. But stay tuned. Thanks for stopping out. You're going to see more of this until this thing's out of my shop. Have a good night. We'll see you next time. If you made it through all of my stories yesterday, thank you, and I'm sorry, but thank you for joining in my misery and for offering some suggestions. And also thank you to Google. I know you weren't watching, but thank you to that too. It turns out you can weld some stainless bolt, whatever, magnesium, whatever they are, to steel, mild steel or whatever, if you have the settings just right, and usually if you're using TIG. Who'd have thought? Apparently Google told me that last night, and I thought the first thing I'm going to try today, which by the way it's noon, a little early, but I cut off work so that I could do this. First thing I'm going to try today is TIG. Well, as you can tell by the smile on my face, we had some good results. Let's check it out. So these are very hard bolts, so drilling them out is really going to be a pain. I know I still have one that's really going to be a pain, but heating them up really hot helps get them out of the hole that they're stuck in. And so getting heat in them for welding usually helps. Then if you can get a nut on the end of them, then they'll come out. Well, what I did was I used today, which I had thought, I'm not going to be working on using TIG. I had it all stuffed in the corner while I was working on this project. But with no filler rod, I was able to melt the stainless and mold it into the outer nut first. So I spent all my time on the stainless and then just dragged it out into the welded nut, and we got 2 of the 3 out. So the left side, the passenger side manifold, doesn't have to come out. Unfortunately, the one that broke off all the way down in the threads is on the driver's side, or right side, or left side, whichever way you're looking at the engine. That one's going to be a little bit more difficult, and I haven't come up with a plan yet, but it's noon, or well, almost 1 o'clock, and we've made some significant progress so far today. So let's see where we are with that, and maybe we get through this. I don't know. Let's see here. So that's the one side, and we got these 2 bolts out, and that's great. That's the other one. You can see down in there, the threads, it broke off below the flush point, so I cannot get a nut to weld onto that. So it's possible that whole manifold has to come out. But we're going to work out a little bit. Maybe I can get a drill through it. It's very hard, and I couldn't get a drill through it yesterday. But maybe if I heat it up really hot. Well, it's almost 8 o'clock, and I'm almost done. I've been out here since earlier this afternoon. However, I've made 2 trips to the store, and I have broken 2 easy outs. And I did get a drill through the bolts, but obviously now I have an easy out half in it. I had a lot of comments saying weld on to the one that's flush. I wanted to try to drill first, so I went and bought some better bits than what I had used before, and I made progress. So I thought, I'm going to do the traditional way. I'm going to put a drill bit through it. I'm going to use heat. And it went well until the easy out broke, which is typical for easy outs. It's not uncommon. But now I have a half of an easy out that I got to get out. and decide what I want to do next. So I haven't given up yet and pulled the header out, but it's looking more and more like pulling the header out might be the better way to get this done. However, if I can get the easy out, I might just cut a new hole, tap new threads with a different size bolt, and try to live on for another day. So since I can drill through it, that may be the option we take here. Don't tell the dealer that I traded in. Just kidding. It's not problem. Not problem. Anyway, no progress tonight other than lots of new curse words, most of which are in German. Have a good night. I'll see you next time. 2 hours into day 3. And, well, I gave up on trying to fix the driver's side exhaust manifold in the car because I tried drilling it out and I couldn't get it, broke off a easy out. And then I tried to weld a tab onto it to try to put a bolt on it, and that didn't work either. The last thing I was going to try to do was try to drill it out and then tap new threads. I couldn't get the second after the thing to center to well enough to tap the thread, so I can't get a drill through it now because there is still a half of an easy out in there underneath the weld that I tried. So it's all messed up now. So it's got to come out. I'll flip it over and drill from the other side from a drill press, in theory. Because I downloaded the workshop manual for this Mercedes from Mercedes, and I got the instructions on how to remove the exhaust manifold. And step 1 was to loosen the reservoir for the power steering pump. I did that. Pushed it out of the way. I did that. Then remove the heat shield. And it shows a picture. And that picture is on an engine stand. And you know what I think? I think that they believe that you never have to take this out. And if you do, you take the whole engine out, because you can't get the heat shield out of the car without removing the steering, analog brakes, and the power steering reservoir. Not just pushing out of the way, removing. I haven't even got to the manifold yet. So there is the heat shield. Can't get it out without taking the steering shaft out and this reservoir and these fuel lines. And right there is the exhaust manifold. So we're going to keep at it and see how we can do. Maybe we can get it running. It's definitely not going to be running today, but maybe someday. At the very least, I got the rest of today and tomorrow afternoon to work on it. And then it just stays in the garage until I can get time again. So in the meantime, we drive the truck in the car, and I'll keep giving you updates as they come. And I'll let you know all of my new German curse words as I learn them. See you soon. Well, it is beer 30. And we got the shield out, mangled it a little bit, but we'll get that done. And then this is the manifold, and I gave up. So called Mercedes, got a price. I got to call tomorrow morning and get it ordered. It'll be here sometime Friday or Monday, and then I'll start putting it back together. Still trying to decide whether I'm going to go deeper and fix those seals that I started to job to do with, or I'm going to spend some time trying to figure out exactly where that oil is coming from tonight. And then tomorrow, maybe I'll do the shocks, and we'll see. So thanks for stopping out. We'll see you next time. Another crazy afternoon in the shop. Today, so far, we've got our side shock replaced. Old one's over there. Got another new one for the passenger side that we're going to do next. I called Mercedes. I talked to a guy there, and it turns out there is no record of the values in this engine being replaced. So I think I'm going to go ahead and finish the job, take it out, and replace everything, which means it may end up being more stuff that gets broken, and I may end up hating this even more. But because that job is never recorded being done on this car, it's very possible that I go through all this trouble and then end up, if I don't do that, then I end up having the actual problem that I set out to solve. So we're going to go ahead and do that over the course of the next few days, and I'll share as much as I can. Okay, little sidetrack, a little bit of a tangent today, but this is the first time I've had the wheels off this car. Believe it or not, in a year of owning it, I haven't taken a single wheel off of it. Let me show you something. This right here bothers me. Is rusty and this chipping off nonsense. So we are going to see how it looks on the front and then maybe do the back too. Gonna put these things in here like this. Now the passenger side is all set. So that one went a lot easier. The second side went much easier. The bottom bolt on the driver's side, the threads were stuck in the bushing for the lower control arm. On the passenger side, it just came out by hand. It was smooth as butter. All set on that, just waiting for the paint to dry on the lug nuts and the center caps, and then I'm going to put it back together and put it back on its wheels, and then I'm going to start digging into this engine again and see where we get. Manifolds come in tomorrow, and I'll put them in sometime this weekend, the new exhaust manifold for the driver's side here, and then I'll finish doing the seals, put it back together, and hopefully we'll get it back on the road. But that's it for tonight. Have a good night. We'll see you next time. It is Friday, day 5. And I went today to the Mercedes dealer and I got the new exhaust manifold that doesn't have the easy out stuck in it. Started putting that back in tonight together. And I wanted to show you the real hero from this job. This is what has prevented more of that in this thing. So let me show you what. So down there's the manifold, and the bolts kind of go on an angle up like this, so I have to put nuts on them, and it's really hard to see what I'm working on, and I can't seem to find it down here like that. So this is the real hero here. If I can just get this guy, and I can find it, and then I tipped it wrong. There we go. Now I can tighten it. Well, if you've been following along, you might have seen me mention the heat shield the other day, and I am finally finished. I got the manifold back in, and the manifold took me about maybe 35 minutes to get back into the engine. The heat shield took the rest of the afternoon. Let me show you. So everything's back in and torqued down. I had to take the steering shaft out. I had to take the power steering reservoir out. But that shield right there ends up with these two bolts. These two bolts are up underneath this reservoir, way down in there. And it is impossible to get to. I have been fighting with those for an hour to get those bolts back in. I could get them out because I could get them on an angle to get it out, and it just kind of bit a little bit. But to get them back in, they have to be straight or else they're going to strip out. Whew, that was a task. But we are now back on Friday, day 5. We're back to where we started on day 1 when I broke those 3 bolts off. So if there's ever a question, if your mechanic ever says, we broke off a bolt and it's going to cost you an extra $1,000, believe them, it is. And hopefully they don't charge you for that, but most of the time it can really change the dynamic of a job. So I'm back to where I was on Monday, and I have decided I'm going to continue taking the engine apart, go for the rest of the cooler, get all the seals done, clean out the intake manifolds because these things can kind of get sooted up. And that means breaking open the coolant and starting a whole... I got to open another big can of worms. So, thanks for stopping out. Stay tuned. There will be more, obviously, on this as I finish the job. The original job was supposed to take 8 hours, 8 to 12 hours. Since I'm 20-some into it, I'm sure it'll take another 20-some hours. But that's okay. We'll get it done. We'll get it right. We'll get it out of here. Thanks for stopping out. That's it for tonight. See you again next time. It is Saturday, and you guessed it, we're back at it. Now, I'm not going to have a full day today. I've only been at it for maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, and I have to quit early because I got a nap because I got to work late. But let's see what we got. This is what started this whole mess. This is the oil cooler, and this is the moment of truth. We can see there is not oil buildup here. There's a little bit of residue, and you can see it's on the sides, which means that it was coming down from the top like I thought a couple days ago, and there's not really any signs of this actually leaking. There is some water over here. You can see that. That's from the coolant passages that when I took the intake manifold out. But we're going to pull this out and see if it was the old seals or the new seals. This one and this one are coolant passages. This one and this one are oil passages. I do need to get that oil out of that coolant passage. But this is where the cooler sits, and you can see there is oil down in there. The seals might have been weeping a little bit. But they are the original color. So, new, old. In 2010, Mercedes issued a technical service bulletin about this car and the cars like it, stating that the new purple color is the right color. The orange ones were prone to failure due to excessive heat. So, going the rest of the way in is a good idea because this could be problematic in the future, whereas these are more likely to hold up better and withstand the added heat, especially given that I plan to tow with this, or at least I'd hope to. Having second thoughts with the reliability of it at this point, but we'll see. I really would love to see this thing stay in the fleet for another year or two, just because it needs to earn its keep. But that's it for now. We're going to start putting this back together. Thanks for stopping out. Have a good Saturday. We'll see you next time. Welcome to the shop. It's Monday night. We have company. What happened, buddy? Would you fall and hurt yourself? Let's show him the boo-boo. Uh-oh. 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 Somebody was playing a little too hard, huh? You gonna be all right? We're gonna go in a minute and clean that up, right? Yeah. But first, I should do that first, but nothing getting done today. I mowed the grass and then came in and figured I'd show you guys what you missed out on yesterday. Yesterday I did some cleaning and I found more broken parts. Let's check it out. So these are the intake manifolds for the motor. And if you look right in there, if my helper shines a light in there right there, you can see they get pretty darn dirty inside these holes. These are what are called swirl flaps. They kind of close up and they help with a low boost situation to send more air through a single hole than less air through two holes. So it kind of changes the way that it goes. They're called swirl flaps, and it helps swirl the air into the combustion cylinder. But what we found while we were doing this is, hold on, don't touch, is when we go all the way open, stop. We go all the way open, we see a couple of them that aren't quite open. And then when we go all the way closed, we see a couple of them that aren't quite closed. Well, what we found was we have a little bit of play in our end link right there. And that will allow this thing to not quite operate right. And it can make that soot even worse. So this side was way worse than this side with soot buildup. Now, if you look up the OM642 engine in the Mercedes or the Jeep Grand Cherokee here in the United States and a couple other ones overseas, you'll find complaints about this type of a thing. They get so gummed up that the swirl flap actuator motor stops working right. Those things break, and then you end up having to buy a new set of manifolds, which cost right around $350 or $400 per side. Now, I could do that because that's the only way to get those parts, or you can order aftermarket ones. I ordered some aftermarket ones. They'll be here Wednesday. So until then, we're stuck doing something else while this thing's stuck in my shop. Now, some people online also delete the swirl flaps, which will create a little bit less power in a low boost situation. So when you're just a little bit on the throttle, it won't quite make as much power. But then you don't have this problem, because when those flaps get stuck, the car goes into limp mode and then you have no throttle. So we're probably going to fix the problem and then maybe also disable them so that they stay open all the time, and that will help us not have a gunked up intake, and if it maybe get a little bit more out of the motor in the long run. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for stopping out. We'll see you next time. Soon, I hope, if this part comes on time. Much to my surprise, Amazon delivered today, and I got my new parts. Yeah, that is a crankcase vent filter, and what I'm doing is I'm going to reroute the crankcase vent away from the intake so that hopefully the intakes don't foul up as much as they have been in the past. But I also got the new connecting rods, and I was so excited to get started I forgot to show you guys what they look like before I put them in the car. Let's see what they look like in the car. So you can see they're all in there. No play. These are actually an aluminum metal connecting rod. A few companies that make an upgraded EGR or swirl flap kit for these that take those plastic ones and use aluminum connecting rods like this. A lot of Sprinter vans and others will use that because they do wear out, as you can see with that elongated hole there. The problem is that if you strengthen that connecting rod, you wear out the clips on the intake and you end up having to replace them anyway, which you can get replacements, but I opted not to. I'm going to disable that system and bypass it altogether. Part of what I wanted to do was make sure that it works when I put it back together, then I'll disable it and we won't have to worry about running into that problem in the future. And if we ever do, then it'll be time for those new intakes. I'll show you how far I get tonight, but we're going to keep going on the installation. Wow, I got to address that hair. That's got to happen soon. But here's what we got so far. Didn't make much progress today, but that's okay. We did make progress. It's just not visible. I'll show you what I got. I have the intakes in and torqued down. I have the swirl motor back in. I have the harness starting to go back in place. But the hard part about this is the charge air pipe that comes up down here and then connects in here. And then there's an EGR connection back there. All of that stuff is very hard to get to, and it was very hard to get settled in. Plus, I took some extra time to make sure that I torqued the bolts down in the right pattern and all that stuff. But the biggest problem that I'm having, and this is my own fault, is all of these bolts look the same. So if you take them out and you put them in a bag that says above intake, fuel line at top of motor, and you put them all in this bag, and you're like, oh, they all look the same, we're good to go. But then you start pulling them out and laying them out, and you realize they are all slightly different lengths and even a little bit different thread size. And that's when you realize you really messed up. I'm pretty good at taking things apart and putting things back together and knowing which bolt goes into which hole. And I usually can tell that by looking at the head of the bolt or focusing on what I'm working on, and then I keep those parts together. And I was trying to do that. Each little section has its own bag. But each section has so many different bolts in it, and they all have the same head. So it's taking me a little extra time to get that right. It's aluminum. I don't want to screw up the threads. But thanks again for stopping out. That's where we ended up tonight. We'll go at it again tomorrow, and maybe tomorrow or Friday or Saturday, one of these days, we'll get it back together and going. We'll put some oil and coolant back in this thing and see how we did. This is the nerve-wracking part. Thanks for stopping out. We'll see you again next time. Welcome back to the shop. A little late start tonight because I had to go get some stuff from the store and get an antifreeze, blah, blah, blah. But tonight, turbo pedestal. Sometimes the best tools are the ones you have to make. This turbo pedestal sits on these roll pins, and I didn't know they're supposed to stay in the block. But one of them came out and was up in there. And when I went to put it back in, it pushed all the way in the hole, and I couldn't get it out. So I had to make this little thing go in there and loop around the back and pull it out so that I could get it out. So we can put it back. It's Saturday. Welcome to the shop. We're still working on the Mercedes. So, had a couple of setbacks, had some stuff going on, didn't get a whole lot of time working on it. It's okay. We're gonna get it done today or tomorrow. I'm gonna work on this thing, get it back together. Let me show you what I got so far. So I'm just starting to put the turbo back together. I still had the fuel rail to put in, the charge pipe. I just put the fuel filter, kind of set it in there. I'm getting there. I have very few things left to go. I got to fill it up with coolant, and we're getting really close. What I'm doing right now is I'm putting high temp anti-seize on these copper coated bolts and sorting them out and getting ready to put them back together. So here we go. Wish me luck. See you again soon. Thanks for stopping out. Most of you guys know Murphy's Law, right? If something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong at the least opportune time, when you least expect it, to cause the most amount of damage, something along those lines. I'm installing the turbo, and I'm putting the EGR line back on the back of the engine back here. And this is what it is. And it's supposed to have two of these bolts. And I put one in, and the other one went kerplunk. The other one went kerplunk way down in there at 11:45. It's now 2 p.m. It is impossible to see the backside of that engine. The scope, the magnet, the camera, cannot find it. So, we get out the creeper. We go in from underneath. And I just figured now's the best time to show you guys why we started this job to begin with. See that right there? Those drips of oil coming off. The oil. The oil. That's why we did this, because there's just oil everywhere under here. And that's somewhat okay for some diesels, but not this one. It really shouldn't have that much oil down here. And the plus side is we did find the bolt. It was on top of the axle here. It had hit it and kerplunked and all the way over. And so it's 2:10, and I can get back to what I was doing at 11:30. Thanks for stopping out. We'll see you again soon. All right. To be fair, I did stop for lunch in there a little bit, but yes, I was looking for this bolt for a long time. It would have been smart of me to jack it up and start from underneath sooner, but I really thought, oh, it's right there. I was using the scope, and this thing has saved me so much in this job that I really thought that would get it. The magnet, I really thought it was right there, because when I dropped it, I just heard a little doop. I didn't hear it, kind of rattle down in the bottom of the engine. And it may have gotten stuck there, but I did at one point use the air to try to blow it free. So I had the shop air blowing it around, and that might have dropped it down there. And I've been under it twice, and I didn't find it the first time. So I might have moved it a second time, and then it fell under the axle. But that is what it is. Another 4 or 5 hours of not dropping bolts, and we might have this back together. All right. Fuel rails back in, high pressure fuel line, low pressure fuel line, fuel filter, turbo, charge pipe. I still got to connect the coolant line. Vacuum line's good. Everything's in. Got one bolt. It's not a good job if you don't have a leftover. But that's kind of how I keep track of things going back where they're supposed to go. I have little bags, I put them where they go. So having an extra one is a problem. This one came out of the bag, top of intake charge pipe. So that means it came above the intake from the charge pipe or from the charge pipe. So I was looking all over. I couldn't find it. I finally found it. Let me show you where I missed it. And I can't believe that I missed it, but I missed it. So the charge pipe comes out of the turbo, goes down in there, into the intercooler, back across, into the intake flap. So all of those bolts were in that bag. And right there is my missing bolt. So I dropped the bolt and it cost me 2 hours. I had an extra bolt. That one only cost me 45 minutes. So I'm going to put this last bolt in and then start filling up the fluids. Wish me luck. We're getting close now. Do you hear what I hear? So we're running it little bits at a time, getting the coolant purged, getting everything ready there. Only problem so far is I have a check engine light. And, well, my OBD code reader is off. I don't know where it is. I left it in somebody's car. So I made some calls. Hopefully we have one coming and we can check that, because I want to make sure it's not low oil pressure, because low oil pressure would mean bad things. So, progress. Side note, if you work in auto manufacturing and you don't put an oil pressure gauge on the dash, shame on you. Maybe half the world doesn't need it, but shame on you anyway. Well, if you're watching this, you should be in bed, and I should be too. It's almost 12 o'clock, and, well, there's no Mercedes. I rerouted the crankcase ventilation breather, and I think I'm going to have to readdress that because it seems like there's quite a bit more blow-by in this engine than I thought. Might route that back into the intake so we don't have to smell it. We'll see. We'll address that tomorrow. But for now, I took it for a spin, I got it up to temperature, and it seemed to do okay. I parked it outside just in case it blows a radiator hose overnight or something leaks. Don't have to clean up more of that. And yes, that's all from this mess. I cleaned it up relatively recently, but that is quite gross. Anyway, thanks for stopping out. Thanks for following along, and hopefully we're done with this project for now. We'll see you next time. Have a good night. Well, it's Sunday, and pretty good. There was just a tiny little drop under it last night after the test drive. That could be from leftovers from the project and everything else. Drove it to church this morning. No issues. I am going to have to rearrange that crankcase vent breather because you can definitely smell the fumes. So I'm going to have to route that back into the intake. But I got home, parked it back on the patio afterwards, and sure enough, after the trip to church, there's a puddle underneath of it. Now, naturally, I panic because, I don't want a big puddle under my car after a project. Well, we ran the air conditioning, and that's just condensation. So, all about nothing. So we're going to hit it with some degreaser underneath and see if maybe that's just leftover oil, and we got it. We're in the garage now. It's getting hot out here, but with the Mercedes down, Mia was driving the Jeep. It's over due on an oil change. So now that the Mercedes is running, I got to quick change the fluids in this just in case that has to come back off the road. So we're going to do a quick oil change here, and then we're done for the day. Maybe for a couple of days. Maybe. As is often the case, I finish a project and then immediately get 17 other things demanding my time, and I don't get back out to follow up on it or finish up or to get on to the next project for a couple of days. But we have put about 121 miles on this car, about 120 some miles on this car, and it so far pretty good. It held air in the shocks all night, all day, all couple of days.
which is awesome. And no big puddles underneath of it. No leaks, no coolant, nothing. However, there are a couple of drips. So I pulled it in tonight to see if I could find them. Drips were coming from underneath the engine, and I found they were fuel. So you can see I added a couple of clamps. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. So you can see that the snapping clamps, these are usually the preferred ones that hold better. I added these stainless ones to try to seal that up and make sure that that doesn't leak. And then I cleared off the top of that filter so that it doesn't, so that it shows whether or not it has more leaking on it. It could be the water and fuel sensor. I thought that at first. It could be those hoses. We have had those hoses leak before. That's why I went back to the spring style clamps when we did the fuel filter last time when we first got it. But other than that minor little bit of fuel leaking, I don't think we had any other problems. And 120 miles, I cannot believe how much my wife drives. That's basically what it is. Give it back to her and she's all over the place. But so far so good. We're going to do a little bit more work on it in the coming days, and then we're going to be done with it, hopefully.
Welcome to the shop. It's Wednesday, and look who's back. Anyway, we are back here, and we are trying to solve a couple of problems. One of them is we are going to have to route the crankcase breather back into the intake because it just smells too much, and we've got to take care of that. The other thing we have is we got a little bit of a squeak in the front end. When I replaced those shocks, I didn't tighten the bolts at ride height, so I'm going to have to address that and see if we can put this thing, loosen the bolts up a little bit, and then tighten them back up at ride height so that we can see if we can get rid of that squeak. That'll take care of some of the bushing issues, and we'll see how we go. So here we go. This thing is just bound and determined to get oil on the ground. It just wants to dump petroleum products on the ground some way, any way it can. So my fuel leak is back over here. I can tell it's that hose right there. I'm going to cut that and shorten it a little bit. Looks like I have some extra there. And then this is how I had my catch can ran. So it comes out of the crankcase vent, comes over here into this catch can, and then it goes into a filter here. So this filter filled up with oil, and then this jug got oil in it, but it cracked in the bottom and started leaking. So there's oil to the tune of 1/3 of a quart on the ground. Probably one of my least favorite things to do is to take a hammer, drill, screwdriver, cutter, saw to something that I know is going to cost me a lot of money if I screw it up. So when I took the saw and I cut this intake off so that I could put this rubber boot on, I knew that there's a possibility that I would get stuck trying to replace this thing for $250 or $280. So tonight I took another drill to it. This is the intake plenum for the motor. This goes into the turbo right here. This has 2 sensors in it for mass airflow, and these go to the air filters. So it's an expensive piece. And this guy right here used to clip on like that, and then this guy, which is also the same as that, it's the crankcase vent that comes off of the crankcase, goes into there. Well, because I have that rerouted now, I just drilled a hole in there like this, and it's going to go to the front of the engine and then come back, and then we'll route it in right there, and then this sensor will reach it. So hopefully that will get rid of our smell, and we'll be back in business. Okay, well, that does it here. We got 2 catch cans in it. We have it routed back into the intake. I got it glued on there. I have the air filters back in place, and I'm gonna fire it up and see what we did. Well, I got to tell you, that about wraps it up for this project. I am all set, pretty happy with the way it turned out. It's pretty janky, but that's okay. At this point, I don't care. I mean, this thing has duct tape on the mirror. What do you expect? It's the Shade Tree Jeep shop, and this ain't a Jeep, so we're not going to spend any more time on it. I do have to put the belly pan back on because it was leaking oil, and it got all covered with oil under there again. I do have to wash it again, so that I can get that off of there before I put the belly pan back on. But I'm not going to show any of that because who knows when it's going to happen. It could be months from now. The other thing is I did try to get rid of the squeak, but I found out it has a bad sway bar bushing. So the sway bar retainer has slid over and it was scraping on the bracket. So I will eventually have to deal with that. Maybe I'll show some Instagram stories or something like that, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Stop text. Yep, shoot. Yep, no. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found something interesting or entertaining or something. I also did have some GoPros running, so I'm going to post that in another video, and that orientation will be correct so that it'll be a little bit more friendly to YouTube. I'll call that part 2 or something to that extent. But thanks for watching the whole video, and if you like what you saw, hit me up over on Instagram at mudduck18, and there's a lot more stories like that don't make it to YouTube. So thanks again.